Unë jam Nisa Neza, jam tërpojane, jam artiste, jam skenariste, edhe e kam një podcast me titullin Can't Take Me Anywhere. Jam shumë e lumtur si në këto në shpinë tam sot. Lenik puts to there. I think being Albanian informs literally every part of my life. I think kind of going all the way back, I think the root of it all starts with the language for me. I was in Shibri a couple months ago, and I had this real kind of like personal revelation on this trip where I was like, wow, like we were imperialized by the Ottoman Empire for over 500 years, and there is no reason why all Albanians shouldn't be speaking Turkish right now, or speaking one of the myriad languages of various people who have imperialized us over the years. And we're a small population, so that would be relatively an easy thing to do. And it really like hit me on a very visceral level that just by virtue of the fact that we speak Albanian, that's such an incredible act of resistance. Like there's so much moxie and grit and determination and resilience that's evident in the fact that we speak this ancient tongue of ours. And I think for me, I think and I feel differently in English and in Albanian. And I think that like there's so many, oh my God, so many funny anecdotes that my family and I, we trade with each other, that my Albanian friends and I crack up about, that I can never translate to an American. It just wouldn't land. That you need so much cultural context to understand why this story about the village idiot is the funniest thing I've ever heard in my life, you know? And that to me is so inspiring because I feel like I can access a really rich emotional landscape within myself. Like I feel like Nisa never gets bored of Nisa because there's so much terrain in the world of Nisa. Like I have so much color that comes from the world of my Albanian identity, and then so much that comes from my American identity. I think a lot of just the way I interact with life and what I expect of life comes from this very mystical Balkan mentality. It's something that's kind of ineffable unless you are a Balkan person. And then if you are a Balkan person, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's giving evil eye. It's giving dream symbology. It's giving, I need to go consult the neighborhood mystic to undo the curse that someone put on my family 2 generations ago. It's just like, it's so embedded in the way that we think and the way we move through life. And obviously that's going to inform me as a writer and as an artist, because it's like I'm always dealing in 2 realms, honestly. It's like everything that we're just in our quotidian, you know, the taxes of it all, the subway, your lunch, like all of these things to me, that is for a lot of people, I think, the stuff of life. For me, it's just like, okay, it's just like the stuff I got to do to get through life. The actual stuff of life is like everything right beneath the surface. It's like that intuitive sense, your dreamscape. It's that like I have this personal thing of anytime someone thinks of me, or like they had a dream of me last night and they haven't seen me in a long time, or like I just came up in conversation for them, I always appear. Like I don't know why, I'm like God just delivers me to people when they need me. And I think that's such a magical way to move through your life, and that I think is so linked to my Albanian identity, is like trusting the magic of life and trusting that life is a really like beautiful, mutable force. And it's not just something that's like zeros and ones and black and white. It's like actually it's quite like murky and dreamy and strange, and like why not lean into your own mystery? Why not lean into your own kind of the legend of your own life? That's something I kind of like really preach, is be in conversation with your own life. And there's no coincidences, and don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. I'm really proud and grateful to say that I think in my family, we really kept our roots in a really cool way. Like, I don't know how my parents, actually when I talk about it, I'm like, how did they pull this off? Because my parents at once, like, okay, when I was about 5 years old, my parents were afraid that I wasn't retaining the language as much as they wanted me to. So they just shipped my ass off to Tropoi for an entire summer with my grandparents, and I came back a little Tropoiana, ready to talk my talk and walk my Tropoiana walk. And I get so sad when I meet Albanian-American kids who can't speak Albanian. Like, and it's because I'm just like, that's such a huge part of the culture for me. It's so much a part of being Albanian is accessing the Albanian mentality through the language. So that the fact that my parents imparted that upon us and expected that of us is so awesome to me. And then at the same time, they didn't have, I think, a lot of the negative complexes that a lot of Albanian American kids struggle with their families, which sometimes makes them resent their culture. And that's really sad to me because, of course, I hear so many stories of like Albanian kids feeling that they're not accepted for their identity, whether it's their identity as an artist or their sexual identity. Parents not understanding their lifestyles, parents just being incredibly overbearing in a way that makes them feel that they can't be themselves. My parents were not that. They let me go to concerts as a teenager. They took me to museums. They let me be myself. But then they also really taught me about the culture. And they saw I was curious. Like, I loved stories. I loved hearing about my ancestors. I wanted to know more. And I hope that in some way that I can serve as an example of like what I come up against a lot when I talk to diaspora kids is they feel like they've only been presented black and white. They've only been given two options. It's like you can be like Jamadani via via in your Mercedes, like being like the most kind of like toxic masculine, like Albanian, like very embedded, like you only have Albanian friends. It's like you're so in it that like you're so far in deep, right? Or you have to reject the culture completely. You know, it's like you just completely immerse yourself in the culture of the country you grew up in, and then you have to reject that Albanian part of you because it's cringe, right? Or it's like so traditional that it's embarrassing. And that's always been so depressing to me because I'm like, no, I can be both. I can be both things. There's something about the Balkan mentality that's rooted in dark humor as a coping mechanism. This is something my sister and I talk about a lot, is like because of this, there's something about this like history of struggle and pain and collective like trauma that is so conducive to people becoming like dark jesters of their own realities and like leaning into how absurdist life is. How can that not be inspiring as an artist? How can you not like see that as a well of inspiration? I just think like go back to the motherland, invest in speaking your language. Something I personally have gotten into this year is like I looked around at my world, Nisa's little social world, and I was like, wow, like I be talking a lot of game about my Albanian identity. Like I am this Albanian life on Instagram. Like it's so much a part of how I carry myself in the world. And I looked at the people around me and I was like, I don't have any Albanian friends. Like this is embarrassing. Like, and I really didn't. And it by no fault of my own. I didn't. I grew up in a town that was 50% Korean. Like I grew up with different ethnicities. I didn't grow up with Albanian culture. I didn't grow up particularly close to my, cousins, and I had like kind of a small nuclear family. And so I kind of set out to build for myself my own little like crew of Albanian friends, and it has brought so much joy and humor and love into my life. Like, the Albanian-Americans, the tri-state area Albanians, if you know, you'll know. I was sitting with one of my Albanian friends, shout out Tony, and we were waiting for our two other Albanian friends, shout out Edina and Verde. And Tony and I were hanging out, Edina and Verde were a little late, and then when they finally pulled up, they were like, oh my God, you guys, I'm so sorry we're late. We've been stuck in traffic. Like, traffic getting here was nuts. And we're like, where were you coming from? And they were like, Connecticut. And then Tony and I both at the same time, unprompted, go, Canarica? And it was so funny. And that's the kind of thing that like, like your American, non-Albanian American friends won't understand why that's hilarious. But you don't even have to give the context to your Albanian American friends to understand why them saying like Canarica is just the funniest shit in the world. And so I think like, I just encourage us all to like, instead of getting down on like the parts of the culture that give us ick, why don't we just lean into the parts of our culture that give us so much humor, that bring us joy, that are rich in history and magic, and celebrate that. And we are the next generation, right? It's like this idea of like, we don't need any kind of like bigoted ideas or parts of the culture that we feel like are not serving us collectively as the like Albanian youth all around the world. Like, okay, we can dispel that. Like, that's on us to create this new Albanian identity. And I hope that it can be one that honors tradition, that keeps, Vala alive, the dancing, that keeps our language alive, that keeps our food alive, and all these things that are so intrinsic to our identity, but that gives us space to like be queer Albanians, to be artists, to be living maybe like atypical lifestyles, and be feminist too. Yeah. Okay. That's it. That's all I have to say. That's my soapbox.